That's what we call climax,
Mm.
right? It's a moment in time. Orgasm is the full experience.
Oh, amen. Amen. Okay, say that one more time.
Orgasm is the full experience.
Mm.
There's, it's from the whole time, the whole experience of it being highs and lows, the anticipation, the waiting, the explosion of flavor in your mouth, the different sensations your body's feeling, from the heat to your chest to the salivation of your cheeks.
Something about you saying that, like, I just felt like my eyes just, like, watered up. It was like, or that orgasm is the experience, and I just think that so many women are craving an experience, and they're resistant to sex. They're shutting down from their partners. They're not turned on because we are so attached to this thing called a climax, as if that is the experience. Welcome, Steph.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. You have no idea.
Yeah, we had such a good conversation the other day when we first met, and I just knew, like, within every cell of my body, that you were the person that I needed to bring. I knew I needed to bring Om to my community, but I needed to find the right person to bring this topic. And yeah, I'm just so excited. So, what the heck is Om?
Well, yeah, let's just dive right into it. So, orgasmic meditation, or what OM practitioners call OM, is a partnered meditation where one individual strokes the other's clitoris with no goal other than to feel sensation in their own bodies. Let you
So,
read that in for a second.
yeah. Okay, the first thing that stands out to me, first of all, is okay, so someone is going to stroke my clitoris, a partner of some sort, and there's no goal. Like, what do you mean there's no goal? Like, anytime you touch the genitals, like, they're not trying to orgasm? Like, it's called orgasmic meditation.
So this is what's really what had me really fall in love with this particular practice, right? So in the traditional world, we refer to orgasm as that explosion of sensation that happens during a sexually intimate moment. In orgasmic meditation, we call that climax.
Mm,
And so the difference here, I'd love to walk you through this and kind of walk everyone who's watching through this,
yeah,
is just so you can actually viscerally understand the difference between climax and orgasm. So, are you a big fan of desserts by chance?
sure. I have 3 in my fridge right now.
Perfect. Okay, which of those three are your absolute favorite?
Probably apple crumble.
Apple crumble. Okay, do you put it in the oven?
Oh, yeah.
Because you add ice cream to it?
Yes, ideally, but no, because I'm not eating dairy.
You're not eating dairy. Okay. So, I want you to imagine that you take this apple crumble and you put it in the oven.
Mhm. It's
And
it
as
literally I literally just put it in the oven before I jumped on here.
so perfect. So, so as it's in the oven and it starts to bake, you can start to smell the aroma, and the smell starts to kind of fill up the kitchen. And immediately you take a breath in and you start to notice you're salivating a little bit.
Mm.
The timer goes ding and you're like, okay, great, I'm going to start now. Put on your oven mitts. You open the oven door, you pull out the apple crumble, the heat kind of fills up your body. You put it onto the stovetop for it to cool for a moment. You take the knife and you can hear the crunch from the apple crumble topping.
I'm getting giddy.
And you take your whatever it's called to lift the apple crumble onto your plate, and it's just perfect. You take your fork, you crush it into the apple crumble, and you bring it closer to your face for a bite. You take a breath in, you can smell it so much stronger now. Bring it into your mouth. You're salivating even more. You let the flavors wash over your tongue. You take a big deep breath in and you swallow.
Mhm.
So good, right?
So good.
Now, at what point were you at like the peak sensation?
My instinct wants to say, like, when, like, it got in my mouth, but I also love anticipation and build up. So for me, I was, like, getting really, like, excited and giddy when we were, like, taking it out of the oven.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a really great example for you then, because there is a moment where you're like, yeah, like it's in my mouth now. That's what we call climax,
Mm.
right? It's a moment in time. Orgasm is the full experience.
Oh, amen. Amen. Okay, say that one more time.
Orgasm is the full experience.
Mm.
There's, it's from the whole time, the whole experience of it being highs and lows, the anticipation, the waiting, the explosion of flavor in your mouth, the different sensations your body's feeling from the heat to your chest to the salivation of your cheeks.
Something about you saying that, like, I just felt like my eyes just, like, watered up. It was like or that orgasm is the experience, and I just think that so many women are craving an experience, and they're resistant to sex. They're shutting down from their partners. They're not turned on because we are so attached to this thing called a climax as if that is the experience.
Absolutely. And that is one of the main reasons why I'm such an advocate for OM is like in our everyday lives, we're so climax driven all the time, right?
Mhm.
And so if we go back to the food example, food is a great place to look at where we're addicted to climax,
Wow, yeah.
right? Like it's not about smelling it, smelling the
Mhm.
apple crumble and basking in that. It's about get the apple crumble, shove it in our mouth, even if it's hot,
Burn her tongue on the way.
burn our tongue on the way.
Wow, yeah.
Right? And so the same thing I believe happens in sex and intimacy is let's get to the thing. Let's get to the climactic moment because that's where I'm going to feel the most pleasure instead of being able to feel the pleasure that's in the peripheries that we've been ignoring.
Mhm. So when you say goalless, so I'm hearing, okay, it's goalless. So the goal is not climax, what most people think of as orgasm, it's climax. The goal, not, I guess it's about experiencing orgasm, which is the experience. So then are you saying like the intention of stroking the clitoris is not to come to climax or you don't come to climax?
So what's beautiful about being goalless is that you can climax or it could not. It could happen or could not. The thing to notice is that climax is simply just a moment in time that may or may not happen.
Does it change the benefits or does it change the experience?
Nope, not at all. I've had sessions in my practice where I've climaxed, and then others where I haven't at all.
Mm.
And some of the ones that I haven't at all have actually been the most nourishing and the most fulfilling
Mm.
for me. Because one of the
Totally.
beautiful things about OM, if you speak to any OM trainer, we always say, as in OM, as in life.
Mhm.
And OM really acts as this beautiful kind of like petri dish for you to take a look at how you're behaving in other areas of life.
Mhm.
And so for me, I am a recovering perfectionist and control freak. So what happened in my own practice in the very early beginning is I was constantly driving for climax.
Mm.
And so in that constant drive for climax, there was these other sensations that were happening in my body that I'd completely missed.
Right.
And then as I continued with the practice, I started to realize, oh my gosh, my constant internal motivation for climax because I have an attachment to it is actually diminishing the practice for me and the other practitioner.
Mhm.
And so once I moved out of that and I really started to embody and embrace the goallessness of the practice, I started to realize that some of the most sensational strokes that were happening were not anywhere towards climax.
Right. Yeah. I noticed when I did the practice, um, there at once you learn about the practice, those of you who are watching, one of the things that I assume that this is called at the end. You can correct me, but is the grounding sort of downstroke at the end, stroking down. And I remember feeling this like deeply satisfying sensation, like that it wasn't, yeah, it wasn't like leading me to climax at all. And I remember the whole I was like trying to get to climax the whole time. It was like I was so stuck in my head about that and or chasing that sensation when I would almost I'd start to feel the build up, it would be like, get it, get it, get it, like that you chasing, if you will. And so at the end when we were doing the downstrokes, it was just like, whoa, like these sensations are leading me uh, out of the practice or even like away from climax, but it was like just a different sensation that I had never got to feel in my body because I was always so attached to what I thought I had to do to perform for my partner to make sure he felt like he was doing a good job.
Yeah, and what this is so great that you bring this up because this is the other thing that I love talking to my trainees about. So in Om, the way that you're positioned in the practice, the stroker, which is genderless, they can be male or female as a stroker, um, they can't see you. They can't turn and see your face and be validated by whatever face porn taught you to do.
Mm,
Because this is a goalless practice where the only intention is to feel sensations in your own body. The stroker is feeling into the sensations they're feeling and then adjusting accordingly.
mm.
And so it's creating this deeper sense of trust within yourself in partnership and connection with another person for both the stroker and the strokee instead of being validated by something that may or may not be true.
Okay, so someone's partner, whether it's let's talk, say, in a relationship right now. We'll get into like what you can do this with other people. Let's talk about your relationship first. So why, or I mean, I guess this question works for in general. Why would someone want to be the stroker? Why would my partner be interested in doing that? Because like it just kind of seems like they're getting like the shit end of the stick here.
I think one of my favorite lines from one of my senior teachers was, um, do you really want to be that person who's like, yeah, honey, I'm not going to touch your genitals?
Right.
Like, do you really want to be that person? But I can also understand and sympathize with that sensation of like, wait a minute, I have to do this for her.
Well, it's more like, what am I getting out of it? Like, why would I not what I, I can see why someone would want to, touch their partner's genitals, but like, like it's one-way touch. It's like stroker is touching
Right.
the clit. So it's like, why there's that one-way touch? I think there's something in that that is powerful and healing, which I'm sure we'll get into, but also like is really foreign to most people in all sexual type situations.
So I think I'm going to answer your question with a question.
Okay.
Is it a one-way touch?
Is it a one-way touch? Well, I mean, I'll say like society standards of one-way touch, I would say it
Sure.
is.
Sure. But like in the actual experience, the strokey is focusing on their clit.
Mhm.
Okay. When you focus on your clit, it pushes out,
Mm.
right?
Yep.
If she's not focusing on her clit, it'll start to attract.
Oh,
It is fully both people are engaged.
interesting.
So
So you wouldn't consider Om a one-way touch practice?
no, it's a partnered meditation.
What? Okay. So on today when I was getting ready for this, I thought to myself, why does Om feel so radical to bring to your community? And I was like, well, because I get, even resistance sometimes with couples who are saying, it doing anything around it being the partner receiving something. If okay, she's only going to receive oral pleasure and he's not going to get anything for
Mhm.
the a period of time as she's learning how to receive and that type of thing. So I thought this is a really great other thing that they can do, and I was kind of thinking about it in the same category, but you just kind of shook my whole world about this idea that all of it, regardless of any engagement, is never one way touch. It's like what that person gets something from being in my presence, from being in my pussy's wheelhouse. Like, oh,
Absolutely. And like here's the thing. And so I love that even this morning you thought about it, how receiving is like a passive thing.
yeah,
There is so much work behind receiving love.
so much.
And
Wow.
so if you're someone who is open and receiving, it is not a one-way touch. And the stroker, I mean, even just on a more practical way, society has really conditioned men to be performance oriented,
Hmm.
right? Am I doing this right? Am I getting it right? What did I do wrong? Does she like what I'm doing? And it starts to really pull at them. And it can create things like performance anxiety.
Hmm.
And then that whole goal orientation where like you don't matter unless you're accomplishing things.
Mhm.
Om is like, oh, I'm stroking the clit. I'm feeling sensation all the way from my finger, all in my body, not just centered around my genitals,
Right.
right? And so it's opening the body to the periphery experiences, opening the body to understanding that your attention is not just single minded. And
So
in the strokers that I've met, one of the things that they've always shared with me was that they love oming partly because it allows them to increase their capacity to provide quality attention.
ooh, say that again.
It increases their capacity to provide quality attention
Right.
because they're
Yeah.
not like trying to get anywhere,
Mm.
right? They're like, what am I feeling? What's happening in my body? Do I limbically realize that maybe I should stroke slower?
Mhm.
And that is totally reflective of what happens in their professional world when they're in a
Yeah.
sales call, right? So if you're a salesperson, you might find, oh, limbically, like what am I feeling here? Oh, I need to slow down here
Mhm.
for this prospective client. That skill is a muscle memory that is enhanced by the Om practice.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
So, would you say that Om is a sexual practice?
Oh God, I mean innately because of society, but I think it's a wellness practice.
Right.
Like it's
Yeah.
how. So as I mentioned, like I'm a recovering perfectionist and control
Mhm.
freak. That like that side of me creeps in every once in a while,
Mhm.
but I used to have like debilitating anxiety,
Mhm.
like convulse on the floor, not be able to control my body, um, anxiety around
Mhm.
nothing at all, around everything and nothing all at the same time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I actually dove into the Om practice and I started to see what behaviors or conditions that I was leading with that were enhancing my anxious experiences.
Mhm.
Once I started practicing more regularly, I started to realize, oh my God, actually, my anxiety is sensations in my body that I can fully feel instead of ignore or push down. And so my capacity to handle anxiety, stress, and overwhelm has increased infinitely so because the things that stress me out when I like list them out to people, they're like, that's a lot to happen to one person. I was like, I know, imagine all of that in 3 weeks.
Right.
Right? Because like I just have the capacity for so much more in my life, so much more connection, so much more access, engagement that
So,
before I would have been like, oh my God, screw this.
one of the things that I had wrote down when I wanted to bring Om to the community was to helping them to find ways to increase sensation in their in their genitals. And so I want to talk about that for a minute because I feel like this kind of links to what we were just talking about somehow. Um, so that to me was one of the things that I noticed was the first couple ohms that I did with my partner. It was kind of like I was numb down there in a way. It's like I couldn't like and nothing was really that sensitive or and then kind of as time went on, I noticed that things would be more sensitive. And then when we would have sex, it was like things were way more sensitive. And that was like a really interesting surprise for me. So, is that one of the, say, purposes, side benefits of the practice?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I had started my practice, when I was particularly not engaged in the practice, like I was mentally
Mm,
somewhere else, there'd be times where I'd be like, where the hell is my clitoris? I can't
right.
feel anything right now.
Yeah.
And it's just about like having it be the practice where you keep bringing your attention back to the spot,
Hmm.
back to where's their sensation. And what you start to realize is how important your attention and the direction it's going is.
Right.
And so once you start paying attention to like, okay, there's the clitoris, there's the clitoris. Okay, yeah, I'm feeling little spurts of electricity or heat, and you just keep focusing there
Hmm.
and start allowing the sensations to start popping up all over your body.
Hmm.
You'll start to like, what's the best word I can use? Like thaw,
Yeah.
because you're focusing on that point of connection, that literal point of connection between the clitoris and the tip of their finger.
Mm-hmm.
And that point of connection starts to open up things for both of you. So not even just in numbness physically in your genitals, but numbness in conversation, things you don't want to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh, I'm feeling something here. So it will absolutely make things more sensational for you. No
Yeah.
doubt in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that's an important reminder too. So one partner's laying back, legs butterflied open. She's getting her clitoris stroked. And so she's not just laying there like, pleasure me. What is
Yeah.
she doing?
So I'm going to kind of explain it from like when I'm in my practice, what I do,
Okay.
just like most people, you notice your tension go up.
Right.
Like, oh, well, shit, I have to go grocery shopping this afternoon.
Mhm.
Right? That happens. You
Mhm.
bring it back and you come back to your clitoris.
Like any other meditation.
Like any other meditation. So instead of like bringing it back to your breath, you bring it back to your clitoris.
Mm-hmm.
And unlike every other meditation, this is a partnered meditation. So it really comes around to the fact of everywhere else in life, you're going to be surrounded by people who are activating you. And here you have a practice where you are actually being activated in your body. Can you remain conscious here? Can you remain in your body? Can you keep putting your attention on the spot?
Versus doing what we would typically do. What would we typically do? And like if we're not being conscious, if we're not staying in our body.
Well, you're either going to disconnect and
Right.
zone out. So the
Yeah.
disconnection part of it, like, peace out, I'm going to go grocery shopping mentally.
Yeah.
Or we go goal orientation. Give me my climax.
Mm.
Right. And so, and even on the other side for the strokers, you're either disconnecting and not there, and it's going to turn into a messy stroke.
Mm-hmm.
And so immediately it's like it becomes a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Or you're going to like really drive for climax and it can become painful.
Right.
Right. I had one of my favorite strokers in LA. I remember having a session with him and he said, sorry, I checked out, and then started the stroke again.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so funny because the moment he checked out was the same moment I checked out.
That's cool.
Right. And so it really just speaks to the fact of like you're either both connected and goalless,
Mm-hmm.
or you're disconnected and totally out of it,
Mm.
or you're goal oriented and it creates like a friction in the experience.
Talk about intimacy as well. Like my partner, my clients want intimacy. They want they want their relationship to just feel more passionate and more connected, and like yes, they want to be having better sex, but ultimately they want connection and intimacy. And so it's like this is such a beautiful way of like being goalless and being intimate together, like having this sort of same focus, if you will, a meeting place without words. And like, it's just, I love it.
Well, and so we're going to rock your boat a little bit more.
Okay.
You ready? You're sitting down. You're fine.
Okay.
So it is a 15-minute practice. So at the 13-minute mark, you go from what's typically an upstroke down to the downstroke you had mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
You end the session with grounding pressure and cleaning up any excess lube.
Yeah.
And you help each other sit up and you share what's called frames.
Mm-hmm.
So a frame is a moment in time where you're describing orgasm at the level of sensation. So it might sound something like, there was a moment I felt heat around my belly button.
Yep.
Or there was a moment where I felt tension in my jaw.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you just start to notice the sensations, like the real sensations in your body. You would never say something like, there was a moment I wanted to kiss you.
Right.
Like, that's nothing. And the way that I love to explain this to clients is when it comes to having frames, it's something that the other person can understand in their body. Right? I will repeat this 1,000 times. Intimacy happens in detail.
What do you mean by that?
So, what I mean by that is when we say something like, there was a moment where I really wanted to hug you. I can understand what it's like to want to hug somebody, but it's still external to me.
Mhm.
Versus if you say, there was a moment I felt heat in my chest. I know exactly what that feels like.
Mhm.
Or a better example is, I'm feeling anxious. What the hell does that feel like for you? Because for me, it feels one way,
Right.
right? So when we say, oh, I'm feeling anxious, it kind of just like leaves it out there for
Mhm.
interpretation. And that's why when people respond with like just breathe, it always feels patronizing
Right.
because anxiety for that person may not actually feel like they can't breathe.
Right. I'm breathing
Right?
fine, actually.
Yeah, it's like, thanks, that's how I got here.
Right.
Versus if they're saying, I'm feeling tightness in my diaphragm and tension in my upper back.
Mm.
You know exactly what that feels like.
Mhm.
Like,
It
even if you were to say, I'm distracted by the tension in my back
Mhm.
when you're saying I'm feeling anxious. It creates a sense of like relatability with another person
For
that would
sure.
not be possible if you just gave it a blanket statement like I'm anxious or I'm nervous.
Mhm. So, I had a question here that, um it's a lot of relationships. I notice that there is something that's often going on in their intimacy life and with their sexuality where one or both partners, generally both, but in different capacities, is starved sexually.
Mm,
They're not getting what they want. And in fact, normally it shows up, one client comes in and, it's obvious who's the starved partner, but really through more conversation, they're both starved. Because they want different things, whether it's one partner wants more sex and the other partner wants more intimacy and connection. They
mm.
kind of want the same thing, they're just talking about it differently. So how how does someone like go about, they're listening to this, they're like, okay, like this sounds like, oh, like, delicious and I want in and I'm interested, but like but their partner is so like, you know, penis and vagina or so penetration based or and also starved sexually and kind of annoyed with like because they have that starvation and
Mm.
when we're in starvation, you kind of just want what you want. You want the goal. And so like how would someone bring this to their partner, to their
Um,
relationship?
well, first you have to be trained.
Okay.
So really, it's about starting the conversation
So yeah,
around.
we'll get into training for sure at the end. So make sure we bring that back up.
Yeah,
So getting into the conversation with
yeah. So the conversation is really about being really clear about your own desire. Like, why do you want to do this practice?
mm,
And why is it that you're resistant to bringing it up to this person? One of the interesting things is not being in a relationship for a while. When I would bring it up to people, I would notice my own resistance. And I'm a trainer. I'm like one of 5 in Canada.
mhm,
And so I was like, wow, like what is that resistance I had? And I realized it was that I wasn't trusting the men in my life to actually want to be a part of this world.
mm,
And so I actually shared that with someone. And I said, I'm one of 5 trainers in Canada who's actively training clients of this practice called Orgasmic Meditation. And I often find myself resistant to bringing it up to people because I just haven't really allowed them to show up for me.
mhm,
And I want to bring you into this practice because it is so important to me. And if you're interested, great. If you're not, that's okay too.
mhm,
Because you want to make sure that, at the end of the day, almost a goalless practice. If you go up to someone with a goal, like, we're going to do this,
mm,
it's not the philosophy. And so, like, the very beginning is like, you just got to ask, would you like to learn Om?
mhm.
Yes or no?
So the very first way that you rocked my world when we were talking, and so I want to bring this up because I know people are going to be eager and they're going to be excited. So a couple of things happened in terms of my journey with Om. I was learning the philosophies kind of online and watching some videos and got really curious. I happened to be taking a trip to LA. I thought perfect. That was kind of the home of where Om was happening at the time. So I took a training there with a couple other women, went to a demonstration, and I was like, oh yeah, I got all like equipped. I actually did an Om with a friend for the first time when I was down there. And then I thought, okay, I'm going home and we are gonna Om all day long. So I came home. I did this with I introduced my partner to the practice by showing him a video and kind of teaching him. And then, we've had great experiences with that.
Right.
And so I was sharing that with you, just like thought being very casual about it. And you're like, whoa, wait a second. So what you shared with me was not only that you should be trained. So like check mark, I did one step right. Like I got trained, but then you just casually said that your partner should be trained. And I'm like,
Mhm.
wait a second. So let's talk about this. Like, what do you mean by training?
Yeah.
Why do we need training? Why can't one person just get training and teach the partner? Like, why can't you just watch a YouTube video? Like,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, all the questions
Because
because
you dropped in about this, like you had this like presence with you that I was like, I just like it was like, I don't know, like you were serious.
yeah,
Like
I am.
yeah. I was like, okay, like she means business here. Like, so tell us like what's the deal?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, one of the ways that I like to explain Om in itself is like if you are a trained trapeze artist,
Mhm.
right? Or you do trapeze yoga, but it's partnered. The idea of your partner watching a YouTube video and knowing what they do so you can feel safe seems insane,
Completely insane.
right?
You would never do
Because
it.
they're like, oh my God, it's dangerous. You could break your head, whatever.
Yeah.
Yet when we come to our like sexually intimate position parts of our body, we don't treat it with the same dignity,
Mhm.
right? And so what happens is you're now trained, and then you go to your partner and be like, hey, I'm trained. And then you expect them to know what you know.
Mhm.
And now instead of actually having the practice for yourself, you're in your head being like, he's not doing this right,
Mhm.
which is like his biggest fear,
Right.
right? And so you're essentially setting him up for failure. And that's not what this practice is about.
Mhm.
Because it's not for you on behalf of him. It's your practice and his practice. And
Mhm.
so we encourage you to be trained by a third party, so like me, because now the practice isn't associated to you. It's associated to, oh, I was trained in orgasmic meditation, my wife was also trained, we happen to have a practice together.
Right. And so I don't know if I think you might have said this or maybe I made it up, but what I heard was kind of like that I made his practice like my practice, or I not that I stole his practice, but kind of like I don't know what way I'm sure you didn't say that in exactly, but it was
Hey,
this
if
I
that's what you got, I'm happy because that's essentially it, right?
right.
So what happens is that he's not aware of all the things that he could be getting out of the practice or how to get the most out of the practice
Mhm.
because he only knows what you learned and you only know what you took away from your training.
Totally. And you know what? When we're talking about this, the feeling that I remember is like almost feeling like I was dragging a little bit, him, and my clients are constantly saying things like, "I don't wanna have to, like, drag my partner. I don't wanna have to, convince them," and I really did feel like I was, convincing, at least in the beginning, until he did get a hang for the practice, and we both were enjoying it, seeing the benefits, that was great, but I felt that energy, which, because I'm, I guess, who I am and I'm so committed to this work, I continued to kind of you know, encourage our relationship to move in that direction. But I think a lot of people as well, like that is such a in general, I think that's an unhealthy place to be in a relationship when
Yeah.
you're trying to like convince your partner or drag them to do something. But because he didn't get the spiel, he didn't get all the subtle details from the stroker's perspective on, like you said, the benefits for him and his life and his practice.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that often when it goes from like partner to their significant other,
Yeah,
like practitioner to a significant other,
yeah,
is is not asking is actually well, how do I want to word this? Basically, at the end of the day, you felt like you were dragging because you had a goal.
yeah.
You wanted
I
to have
did.
a practice. And so what happens is you don't ask and you don't check in with desire.
I know you're going to start talking about consent here.
And this is like what's so funny is because like Did you ask, would you like to learn Om?
Probably not. I probably said, "We're gonna do this thing called Om," and he was like, "Okay."
Exactly. And for whatever reason, this becomes such a triggering thing for people because there isn't any other world where we encourage consent being asked in that way,
Mhm.
a goalless request. Usually it's like, would you like to do this because we're doing it anyways?
Right, you don't really have a
You
choice,
don't really
or
have a
I'm
choice.
gonna be mad at you if you say no.
Exactly. So now there's consequences. But the very first step of Om, so once you've been trained, the very first step is to ask for an Om. Literally, we have like a list of 12 steps. First step, ask for an Om.
Mm.
And then a sub point of that is yes and no are both acceptable and invited answers. And that right there
Mhm.
really triggers people because now it starts to bring up all of this stuff of like, what if they say no? Does that mean I'm invaluable? Does that mean I'm not worthy? Does that mean he doesn't love me?
Yeah.
And having a coach, me, training you and saying, well, no, he just doesn't want to learn.
Mhm.
What does that mean? And maybe it is a discussion where it's like, okay, is there something there for why you don't want to learn or whatever it is, and
Exactly.
that's kind of customized, and I don't want to give general feedback around
Yeah, for
that.
sure.
But at the end of the day, it's just being like, if you're right with your desire to learn this practice, and you share, hey, I learned about this practice called orgasmic meditation. I'm really interested in diving a little bit further into it. Would you like to learn the practice as well?
Mhm.
Because at the end of the day, whether or not you have the physical practice, the philosophies of the practice will give you benefits.
Yeah, I love this. You had said, and it's funny, I was chatting with Nadine, who is a woman who works with me in my business, and I said, I don't know if my audience is ready to hear Om. I don't know if my clients are ready to hear Om yet. And I said, I don't know why I'm just so compelled to bring it to them. And when we chatted, I knew exactly because you said, Janelle, before I even practiced Om, just learning the philosophies changed my life. And I was like, boom, that's exactly why, because I felt the same way and I just couldn't articulate it. So, what is it about the philosophies for you? Or I'm just curious, like, about your own personal experience. Like, what did you notice just by learning the philosophies that made shifts?
Yeah. So I'm just thinking because I was also trained in a class, like a workshop.
Yeah,
They no longer provide them. Your training is really done with coaches now,
right.
um, from the privacy of your own home and fully clothed, by the way. I just feel like I have to say that.
Yep.
But when I think back to my training, because it took me a while to actually have the practice, one of the things that really showed up for me was this concept of attention versus what's the word? Variation.
Mm,
So often when we're like bored in our sex lives, we like to add stuff to it. Let's add all the toys. Let's add the fancy lubricant. Let's add
right.
all the kink stuff, even though that's not
Spice
my
it up.
thing. Let's
Right.
spice it up, even though that's like not a desire for either of you.
Yep.
And so Om says, let's bring it back to your attention. And when you have your attention out, you can start to see what is it that I desire?
Mm.
And you start being able to connect there versus just like adding stuff to the pot just because you think it might help.
Oh, I love that. I always say to couples, like, you don't need to spice up your sex life. I really work on the level of communication a lot. And it's like most of the time, like, you guys are just like in, terrible communication. And that's really kind of where I'll start with them. And I just love what you're saying about this simplicity. It's like you don't need to, that's not generally the direction that, is I would suggest and recommend. And I love that Om is just about bringing this, it's like simplifying.
Simplifying. And it's literally it. And so one of the things that people say is like, well, what's the difference between Om and Tantra? Well, Tantra is ritualistic. So there's
Mm,
lots of stuff in it. Om is a 50-minute partner meditation where one person strokes their clitoris. That's it.
right.
Like that is
Wow.
the whole practice.
That's a
And
beautiful distinction actually between
yeah,
tantra and Om.
yeah, it's so simple. And there's a reason for that. It's very specific because there's three different ways that we respond to like sexual stimulus. We either get really excited
Mhm.
and energetic, so those kinds of people are often passionate and emotional, like
Mhm.
full of emotion. We become kind of dissipated and like disoriented, like, oh my god, like what's going to happen?
Right.
So many options. And then, or we become like quite fixed in our response
Mm,
and want to revert to like, okay, so this is what I've got to do now,
right.
right? So, oh, there's sexual stimulus. This is what I have to do now.
Right.
With Om, it addresses all three. So the person who's hyper emotional, it's okay. It's totally acceptable because that you got 15 minutes to like do whatever needs to happen with your body. Like it's
Mhm.
totally acceptable. It's simple. So the people who are already disoriented because of the energy, it's like it's 15 minutes, that's it.
Right.
Anything longer than 15 minutes you would never want to do on a daily basis.
Mhm.
And it's also structured and timed. So those who are fixed, they go, oh, I know what I have to do now,
Right.
right? So they're not getting unanticipated energy in their body, which they would have in an ordinary sexual experience. It's just simple.
Well, I think there's so many emotions tied up with I see with the couples I work with, the women like in sexual experience, there's so many emotions and thoughts tied up and like relationship dynamics. And what I love about Om and what it really did in my relationship, it felt like it just took all that away because it was so I didn't know why until kind of right now. It's so simple. It's specific. I knew what I was doing, he knew what he was doing. It was like um it just yeah, it felt like it took away all that sort of like tension, if you will, or that confusion or and goals. And so it just like it like gave us that space to connect and to like be in our bodies and be, you know, kind of doing something sexual, but not like, yeah, kind of going down that rabbit hole that most sexual experiences can be that just end in unfulfillment and more tension.
Totally. And so, like, like, out of the philosophies themselves, where we're looking at like attention, where do I actually want to be? What are the things that I want? So, desire,
Right.
attention, and desire are like the thing in my life. Like, what is it that I really want?
Mm-hmm.
And if I put my attention there, what else happens?
Mm-hmm.
And the concept of being goalless. Like, that has been probably the most profound because when I am attached to a particular goal, nothing's going to go right.
Absolutely.
Like in my business, if I'm attached to getting a
Yeah.
particular client, not going to get that client.
Yeah.
In my love life, if I'm attached to going on a second date with this guy, not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like it doesn't. I have yet to find a place where being goalless doesn't benefit me.
Mm-hmm. So
And
true.
it's counterintuitive because we don't live in a society where that says that that's okay.
Right. And do you think it's about you know, having a general you have a because even with Ohm, you have a general direction, I'll say, or that you're headed in terms of like we have a container that we've set of, you know, time and what we're going to do here. So there's kind of a direction because a lot of people think, oh, when I'm not goalless, if I'm goalless, and I'm not going to get where I want to go. Like if I just, you know, do this practice, it's like, how is this going to lead to more sex or more, you know, that type of thing? Because they have a direction that they want to go, but then they're also being goalless in the journey. Like how do we what is I think we need some wisdom in here.
Yeah. So I just got super turned on about this because the other day I actually was thinking about this and I was like in the car and I was like, okay, why is this actually so important? And I love that you mentioned the fact of the containers. And so I don't know how much you discuss like feminine masculine dynamics in your work,
A little
but
bit.
all of us have masculine feminine traits.
Yep.
Feminine is more related to like flow.
Yep.
Masculine is more related to goals and rules.
Yep.
Both, when they're healthy, amazing. Unhealthy, not so much. But the way that I like to think about it, and the way that I had thought about it the other day, is that if you have a bonfire, I'm going to use a metaphor here. Okay. So if you have a bonfire, usually around the bonfire, you have stones. Okay. A container for the fire.
Right.
Now, with inside that container, the fire will grow to fulfill its maximum purpose
Mm.
that serves the most people.
Mm-hmm.
Without that container, without those stones, you risk a wildfire. And that serves no one,
Beautiful.
right?
I talk about containers like I feel like that's probably my favorite word in relationships. And just I see that word everywhere. So that's a beautiful even description as to why having that container and rules, if you will, that structure is just, it's so helpful, but it also, I feel like, gives so much safety to like actually open up, to like lay there with your legs butterflied open, giving your partner access to your pussy. Like it's just, I think it just adds this element of safety as well.
Absolutely. And that's what I mean, right? Like you've got those stones around the bonfire. The bonfire could be 12 feet tall.
Yeah.
If that's how
Raging.
if that's how big it's in nature intended it to be, it will be that big. But without it, it can get dangerous, and it's dangerous for everybody, not just for your partner, but for you as well,
Mm.
right? And that's where, you know, we always anticipate like the feminine is chaos, but it's like, no, the feminine is actually essential. It's this fiery,
Hmm.
flowing, rapturous thing. But we need that container so it can actually serve the people around it.
So, would you say, because a lot of couples, they want more intimacy, they want to, they want more passion, more spark in the relationship, and ultimately they do want to be having more sex.
Yeah.
So, is Om, like, how is Om, I'll say, not is Om, but how is Om, related to their sex life? Um, yeah, how does it
Well, yeah.
related? How is it going to enhance it, or will it enhance it?
Well, so the way that I like to explain it, because one of the other like fundamental things about Om is that Om is not sex,
Yeah.
right? As meditation is not sleep.
Mm,
It will enhance your sleep, but it's not a replacement for it,
right.
right? Om will enhance your sex life, but it is not a
Mhm.
replacement for.
Oh, one thing I really want to say here as well, and you can speak to this, is that Om is not foreplay for
Yes,
sex.
exactly. It is a distinct practice, right? And so, like, meditating before bed, okay, great. But, like, most people meditate in the morning.
Mhm.
It helps them maintain relaxation. And then by the time that they're at the end of their day, they're not agitated for most of their day, right?
Mhm.
Om is a very distinct practice that starts to like train the muscle memory in your body about how to be vulnerable.
Mm.
And we don't treat sex with vulnerability and then wonder why it's not good,
Or intimate.
right? And it's
Mhm.
like, well, here's a practice where you're going to be butterflied open in broad daylight.
In broad daylight. I
Well,
love
yeah,
that.
it's like
Yeah.
not in your bedroom, it's not on your bed, and it's not surrounded by candlelight, right? So you're going to have
Mhm.
bright lights. You could choose to have the windows closed, but it's going to be bright where you're practicing.
Mhm.
And your partner is going to be watching your pussy in a position you will never be able to see,
Mhm.
right? You cannot naturally bend that particular way to see that.
Mhm.
And so you need to have that ounce of vulnerability.
Mhm.
And when you have a relationship to that vulnerability, because that muscle memory is like, oh, I actually know what it's like to be vulnerable here.
Mhm.
You can start bringing that into the bedroom. You're like, I know what it feels like in my body to be vulnerable.
And I'm
And
safe
right,
there.
I'm safe there. And right now, I'm choosing not to be vulnerable because of why.
Mhm.
Right. And so in the bedroom, it might actually end up sounding something like, oh, I'm noticing that I don't want to share with my partner that I actually do want anal.
Mm.
Right. And so then that's the desire is there. The attention is, oh my God, that's the thing I want. But then we cut it off for whatever reason of what's
Mhm.
going on and we pull it back. And then because that's a desire and it's going to sit there and it's going to like kind of eat at you a little bit, you
Yep.
not yet are communicating it, then that doesn't get brought into the bedroom.
Mhm.
And then your partner wonders why you're disconnected.
Mhm.
Right? And then you complain that there's your sex life sucks. Well, behind every complaint is a hidden desire.
Ooh, behind every complaint is a hidden desire.
Yeah.
Hear that, folks.
Yeah. And so if it's sitting there, there's something you want that you haven't communicated, it's gonna seep into your sex life.
Mhm.
In Om, we train around that because there's things that like offers and requests. At the moment it comes up, you say, may I have a faster stroke?
Yeah.
May I have a slower stroke? But what's beautiful is this isn't one-sided. Even the stroker may say, would you like a faster stroke? Because he's feeling it in his body that that's something that is needed, that the
Mhm.
moment calls for,
Mhm.
right? And so it creates this particular container creates the muscle memory around both of you to say the thing in real time.
say it in real time, and that's so important.
Yeah.
So there's like the vulnerability, training the actual sensation, training the attention, training the how what was the voice, using your voice, like asking for what you need or what you're feeling. um wow, like the benefit, like that's why Om needs to be brought to everybody. But
Yeah.
that's these are all the things all day long that I hear couples and women are needing and wanting and struggling with. And it's I just feel like, yeah, just like, every doctor right now is recommending meditation all of a sudden. It's like the hot thing, everyone's talking about it, everyone has a meditation, every coach online has some sort of meditation they can give you, it's the thing. It's like, I feel like Om, just needs to be in this world in such a bigger way.
Absolutely. And I'm a big advocate for that for multiple different reasons. Because like I have a meditation practice as well,
Mhm.
but that doesn't stop me from being instantly triggered by people,
Mm,
right? I get triggered by people. Oh no, I'm triggered. And then it's like, okay, yes, I have some mindful, like post triggering mindfulness,
mhm,
right? But now when I'm triggered, it's like in the moment I notice the sensations.
mm.
And in the moment, I get what's happening. Because I'm not saying that like this person, Facebook is a great place to be triggered.
Yep.
I'm not in a position where I'm making the other person wrong because I have an agenda or a goal for myself.
Mhm,
I noticed that I read this post, I had a sensation in my body, good or bad, it's a
mhm,
sensation in my body. And I get to find pleasure no matter what that sensation is now,
mhm.
versus before I would have been knocked out of it and then had to like trace my way back through my mindfulness practices.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that couples, I don't know if it's I'll say that I think that they're gonna be challenged by in the beginning with this is kind of the idea of separating this practice from sex, from foreplay.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, as like we only ever one let our partner access our bodies in this way, or look at our genitals in, the mood might be set, or it's in darkness, or it's like sexy time. Like that's it. Like
Yeah.
it's a very specific times when we do that. Heck, couples like would even be like awkward getting changed around one another, like they're just not comfortable necessarily with in their bodies. And then I remember in the beginning introducing this to my partner, and it was like he was like it was very much like the list is like sex. And I remember from the training that I had being like, well, no, it's not, because, and of course I was trying to explain, and you know, you guys can avoid that by my learning and just go and get trained together. But it feels like we get so one track minded in our relationship when it comes to our sexuality and our genitals. And I think that the struggle that couples are going to have is understanding, like you said, this isn't done in your bedroom. This isn't setting a mood. This isn't you do this and then you jump into sex. It's your foreplay. So I would love to know why this can't be foreplay in consensual with couples, um, like, yeah, for couples who are together and do have sex. Why is that not a good idea to kind of use this as foreplay or to go right into sex after the own practice?
Om is a non transactional practice. And so, unless your sex is non transactional, which most people's are not, you are
Mhm.
not going to receive the benefits of the practice.
So what do you mean by non-transactional?
There's no such thing as I own you
Mm,
and you own me. This is like not a thing. There isn't, will you own me and I'll wash the dishes,
mm,
right? There isn't, will you own me and I'll give you a blowjob. It is, would you like to have an own? Because the own serves both of us. Like, would you like to have dinner? It is not, would you like to have dinner so I can get laid later? Everyone knows that feeling and it's gross.
mm.
It is, would you like to have dinner? Would you like to have an own?
This feels revolutionary for couples. Like everything in relationships, is transactional.
Absolutely.
I'm going to do this, so I'll get laid later. Or I'm going to like have sex with my partner so that he'll be not crabby and nice, he'll be nice to me. Or, you know, so he doesn't cheat on me. It's like everything is transactional. And we're doing it for a reason. And I think this just to me brings like just groundedness and beauty and so many just much needed things into relationships.
Absolutely. And I mean, and the part of having it separate is because, you know, if there are those transactional behaviors happening in your sex life, this
Mhm.
is how you start to transform that.
Mhm.
And you evolve it into a new kind of sexual encounters with your partner.
Mhm.
But until you have something, it's like that fundamental like muscle, right? You're not going to lift a 200-pound barbell until you've done a little bit of the 5-pound stuff, right?
Mhm.
So you need to have that fundamental practice.
Yeah.
And that particular fundamental practice for vulnerability, intimacy, connection is OM.
So when we talk about training, then
Mhm.
like we've talked, it's come up a lot. Okay, you got to get training. People are probably like, "What do you mean we got to get training? Like, what is this entail?" So you are a trainer, correct?
I absolutely am.
So you train individuals and couples in this process of OM. So I'll put all those links in the description so that you can, connect with her and take her up on a training. And but what exactly for someone who's like, okay, I want to do this, and you're saying I need to get trained. Um, can you just walk us through? I remember you said there's kind of three sessions, correct?
Yeah,
So walk us through those so that people can just get an understanding of the general flow of like what does it mean to be trained in this?
absolutely. So I coach people in 3 sessions, and most of the certified trainers and coaches do. In our first session, we go over the technical stuff, like the
Mhm.
actual 12-step process to have an OM. And we
Mhm.
give you like the very basic fundamental philosophies
Mhm.
to the practice. So you can, by the end of it, you can actually have an OM if you wish,
Mhm.
right? So you have just the really bare bones. This is what it is.
Yep.
Between the first and second OM, generally people will have an OM practice,
Mhm.
whether it's with their partner that they got trained alongside with or someone in the community who has already been trained.
Mhm.
Then, when a second session comes in, we start to talk about, okay, what was that like? Because, like with anything, it can start to bring up stuff. And
Mhm.
by having a coach there, I'm there to guide you through it. So, for example, one of the things that can often happen is, oh my God, I didn't climax.
I did it
Or,
wrong.
yeah, I did it wrong. I didn't climax. Or, oh my God, I climaxed. I did it wrong. This is supposed to be goalless practice.
Right.
Right. And so then I'm there to coach you through, well, it's a goalless. So what happens in it is okay.
Mhm.
No matter what happens. You fart, great.
Right.
That's the thing, right? And it's about pulling away from our attachment to what our body naturally does.
Mhm.
Oh my God, I was silent the whole OM. Oh my God, I was screaming in the OM. What's wrong with me?
Right.
I'm there to actually like support you in that second session. And
Okay.
like, okay, so this came up for you. Does this show up anywhere else in your life? Where
Mhm.
are you making it wrong? Like just traditional coaching stuff, but then also bringing some more advanced philosophies to you.
Yep.
You can feel more grounded in the practice. Then in the third session, you may have had, you know, 2 ohms by then or 3, or if you've done them for a while, like maybe even upwards of 14.
Right.
By the third session, we start talking about what benefits are you seeing from the practice?
Mhm.
What areas are you still concerned or feel like unwavered in or
Mhm.
wavering in?
Yep.
That's where we get a little bit more in the granular kind of coaching side of things. But then we also want to look at what's it going to take for you to have a daily practice
Mhm.
or a weekly practice.
Right.
Um, and then after the third session, you're officially trained after the first one, but after the third, you can confidently say that you're trained
Mhm.
to practice OM.
Yeah.
And after that, you can always reach out to me for additional coaching if you're noticing something like, oh my God, I keep crying in every single OM.
Right.
What's going on?
Mm.
Reach out to me. We coach. You get through it.
Mhm.
On to the next cycle of orgasm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this. Okay, there's just I feel like I could go on and on and on about this practice. And truthfully, it's funny because I feel like so not experienced in the practice, but also like I've got so much from my limited experience. We've had phases in our relationship where we kind of practice sporadically. We've had phases where, a few weeks period where we like did it every day. And I just noticed so many benefits that I had to have you to bring this to the community. I'm totally re-inspired to come back into this practice and also to ask my partner if he wants to come back into this practice and to get trained and to reintroduce it into our life. One thing I'm curious about, because you've said it a few times, and I think I hear other people thinking it as well, was like this idea of like partners. Like you could do it with someone who's trained, or do it with your partner, or like um, tell us a little bit about this idea that if someone either was single or their partner wasn't interested, they could do it with other partners.
Yeah. So this one always feels a little bit radical, and people are really charged around it. But at the end of the day, let's just go back to desire.
Mm,
Do you desire an own practice? Yes or no?
amen.
Yes. Right? Now, in that desire, and you have rightness with that desire, you're like, okay, I'm single. I want to have an own practice. And there are practitioners around me who have been trained in this particular practice. What you can do is simply ask them for a no. Say, would you like to have a no?
Hmm.
They'll say yes or no. Regardless of what they say, you say thank you, and you either plan or move to the next person who you'd like to own with.
Hmm.
It really is a desire based practice. So there is no requirement for you to just own with anyone. It's, oh, there's Jonathan. I would love to own with Jonathan. Jonathan, would you like to own?
Hmm.
There's Stacy. I would love to own with Stacy.
Mm.
Oh, but I don't want to own with Zachariah for whatever reason. Then don't ask Zachariah.
Right.
Right? Usually the area is like, I don't want to own with a stranger. Well, then get to know them. Share that desire with them, saying, hey, I'm new to the practice. I'd like to get to know someone in the community, and maybe down the road have an actual own practice with them.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with sharing your desires and being really upfront and honest.
And so, how does this play, or what have you seen inside of people who are in relationships? Because obviously, this kind of opens up a whole conversation around, well, is this cheating, or monogamous relationships versus open relationships? Like, it kind of starts to dabble into this conversation. It has to, if someone's going to touch my genitals outside of my relationship.
Absolutely.
Um, so, what do you see kind of coming up for couples or people who are in primary relationships with this conversation?
So the first thing is to have a conversation and just really reaffirm the container you're presently in,
Hmm.
right? And so, for example, um, me and my partner have a closed relationship.
Hmm.
Now, if he's not doesn't desire to own, and I say like I'm really committed to having this practice, can we think of a third option? This is like just a life hack for everyone.
Hmm.
Between yes and no, ask for a third option. Just like
Between yes and no,
everything.
ask for a third
And
option.
so, yeah. And so, what I've seen is that people say, okay, well, we're in a closed relationship, but our practice is open.
Hmm.
We're in a closed relationship, our practice is open, but only open to other female strokers.
Cool.
Usually, you get some coaching around that to make sure that's a clean desire and not a transactional thing,
Right.
right? Like, or a controlling thing. Like, you want to get some coaching around that just to make sure it's, very clean.
Yeah.
Sometimes you might be in an open relationship and a closed container for your practice.
Mm.
It's really about what feels good for you and your partner.
I didn't even think about that option, that someone would be in an open relationship, but their practice is closed.
Yeah. Like when I go down to LA, because that's where most of my favorite strokers are, I definitely have an open practice,
Hmm.
right? Because it just feels good for me to connect with different people. When I'm back here, I have a closed practice
Hmm.
because a stroker that I really enjoy, like we have a great connection and we have just a really enjoyable time during our own. I really like to keep that with him.
And so I think I just need to ask because I know that other people's minds are going here. It's like, so you own with these people, like you don't also sleep with them.
No, I mean, you could because you're an adult and you can do whatever you want in your life. But
Right.
like, in the context of you're not required to be in a relationship. It is because it's non-transactional. You can go to someone's house or have them come over, have me and that person leave.
Right.
Like it can be very cut and dry. It's about how you want to create it. Um,
Mm.
you might have an in the morning and then ask that very same omer in the evening if they would like to come over for a makeout. Like, you're an adult.
Right.
Like, do what you desire. Um,
Consent.
yeah, just consent about it. And then,
Mm.
yeah. And so for me, I have not slept with anyone that I've owned with. That's just not my comfort, I guess. Like,
Yep.
it's never been a part of my desire. However, when I'm in a relationship, my own practice is closed no matter where I am.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore I am sleeping with the person that I also own with.
Mm-hmm. So I think one of the final things that's coming up for me is I know for certainty that there is the desire for people watching this right now. They want an own practice. So there is a desire. I know for certain. I know, some of the women that are going to be watching this and some of the couples, and they're going to be like, hell to the yeah.
Yeah.
But what I think the resistance is going to be is around getting their partner on board,
Mm-hmm.
and that they are going to really desire a practice, and not other. They're already creating stories that are probably not true, but
Yeah.
they're creating the story that their partner isn't interested or isn't going to want to, or blah blah blah. So like, what is the best? I remember you said for them to get right with their own desire to own,
Yeah.
and why, and what what does a woman do with that, if that she has the desire, she's in a committed relationship that isn't an open relationship, and the partner does not have a desire, is not currently an open relationship, um, and she has the desire but can't kind of activate that desire, like practice it or try it.
It's a little stuck. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing that I would recommend is just to have a conversation with your partner about even being trained in the practice. Being trained is like just going to rock both of your worlds.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean you have to have the practice. It just means you're both qualified to practice.
Mhm.
And so, just leading in saying, hey, I just heard about this practice called Orgasmic Meditation, and I really have the desire to learn it with you.
Mhm.
I don't know anything further about the practice, but would you like to continue that with me? Do
Mhm.
this journey with me? Let them know that they're not alone, that it can be a little scary, but like, I'll be there with you,
Mhm.
right? We'll do it together.
Mhm.
That they're stable, it's safe, it's done online,
Mhm.
we're fully clothed. She's going to be the one giving us instructions.
Yeah.
And then that it's also desire based. Like, it's if you want to be there,
Yeah.
you know?
And I think too, just like giving this interview to your partner as well, just like warming them up. Like, hey, I just learned this thing. Like, I feel like sometimes in my relationship, so many times I've brought things to my relationship, so I'm trying to explain it. When things started to get a lot easier for me in my relationship was when we had either a coach or an outside source or a video or something that then we watched together, or I introduced to my partner. So like they got to tell him, one of my dear friends and fellow workers in this world, Jaya, she, we've done her course, and her partner was actually who I had my first OM with. And it was like, we just, like, she taught us. And so I didn't have to explain things to my partner, and I got to be in my relationship versus trying to like coach and heal and drag my relationship.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think another thing too is, if you are talking, like, for the listeners, if you are talking to your partner about, possibly pursuing training, the first thing that I would, look at is just don't be diminishing them in the conversation,
Mm,
right? We often bring in, oh no, my partner's just going to be a hard no to this. Well, you're not even giving them the chance,
right.
right? You're already condemning their response.
Mm-hmm.
Just really come in open and saying, I'm right with this desire. I want to learn it. I also have the desire to learn it alongside you,
Right.
right? Because that's the true desire. The desire isn't necessarily for you to learn it and that's it. You
No.
want to bring your partner in with you.
Yeah.
And so share that with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then allow them the opportunity and space to respond with yes or no.
And to think about it. I think sometimes we bring things to our partner, especially things that might seem a little weird or radical or just they've never heard before. And it's like we kind of like, expect them to have this perfect answer right away. But I feel like let your partner fumble it. Let your partner be like, "What? Like, I don't know. Like, maybe they watch this interview. Like, it's okay for them to think about it and like, stew on it and not give you a, enthusiastic yes back because like this is something like, you know, as much as women are trained to like give back sexually, men or your partners or depending on what um type of relationship you're in, like they also have their programming around sex and what it's supposed to be and who they're supposed to be. So I think just giving your partner grace when you open this conversation to them as well.
Absolutely. That's really, really key. And being compassionate.
Mhm.
We can't possibly know what's actually running through their heads.
Mhm.
But I think one of the things about that's really important is we're not trying to fix anybody here,
Yeah.
right? Like people are whole when they come to the practice and they may find healing and they may find deeper connection. But this isn't something to be like, I prescribe to you,
Mm.
right? Like it's not going to work as a prescription. It has to only come as a desire.
Mhm.
And so when you introduce the question, you got to leave room for that desire to happen.
I'm so in love with you. I'm even more in love with Om than I thought I could be. This is just so good. Okay, well, I'm gonna cut it off there because we could keep people forever. But if they want more, I definitely recommend you join her for a training session. It's inexpensive, first of all. It's only 3 sessions. Like it like you have nothing to lose, and like you clearly have a lot to gain. Just listen to what we just talked about. So I will put all the links to follow her in the show notes and the descriptions around this video, links to social media. You can follow her along her journey on there as well. Just connecting with her for the actual own training sessions. I'll put the links to that as well. It really, to me, just feels like a no brainer when that desire is there. And I couldn't just picture a more beautiful soul to do this with. So, do you have any final, I'll say, wishes or words for the listeners of this who are like, the anticipation is there for Om and they're just like excited about it?
Yeah, I think that, um, especially also addressing people who are like, oh my God, desire, that's a foreign thing. Um, just listen to your body.
Mm.
Are you feeling sensation during this conversation? Now, if you don't make it right or wrong, value neutral. Are you feeling sensation? If you are, just book a call with me and talk about it.
Hmm.
You don't even have to like buy the coaching session or the training sessions right away. Just let's get on a call because there's sensation there. There's something that wants to be said. And so let's find out what that is.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And something that we said about towards the middle of the call around that the philosophies both, changed both of our lives and supported us so much just from learning the philosophies. So even if, you're not ready to do, your partner isn't ready, even you doing the training session alone, because that is an option,
Absolutely.
to for you to get trained. If your partner doesn't have to be on board, simply even the philosophies and the understanding of the practice. I'm so activated right now. Like I feel so turned on. And what I mean by that is like I feel this alive and energy and just like excited and um inspired and all these really yummy feelings right now in my body from this conversation. And I think that other people are going to be feeling that stuff too. And I think that that's exactly what we mean by that the philosophies and just the conversation around this will change your life even before you ever take your pants off.
Exactly.